What I would like to do today is to conclude the discussion on dana. But before I do that, let me just recapitulate briefly what we discussed last time. We started out by quoting Vyasa. There is nothing that is more difficult than giving. If one gives even a little with a pure heart to a deserving person, the fruit of that unselfish action is enormous. This is what Vyasa Mahamuni tells Yudhishthira. We said that the principle of dana is to respect the welfare of others and recognize the value of their existence. Empathy and compassion are the foundations of dana. We said that dana is the extension of goodwill to others, parahita. We then discussed briefly various types of danas: godana, bhudana, annadana, vastrudana, dravyadana, pranadana, vidyadana, abhayadana, internet dana, and so on. We also reminded ourselves Krishna's exhortation in chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita that we must never abandon dana, which is our duty to the well-being of others. In addition to yajna and tapas, dana, yajna, dana, tapas are the key duties we have that we should never ever abandon. And then we talked about the three types of dana that Krishna describes in chapter 17, the sattvic dana, rajasic dana, and tamasic dana. And we agreed that the magnitude of dana is not so important, but the attitude with which we give is the most important thing. We then discussed the 5 types of dana as enunciated by Bhishma to Yudhishthira in Anusashana Parva in Mahabharata. Dana rooted in dharma, dana given for one's own security, dana rooted in fear, dana given to fulfill one's desires, and dana freely given out of love, compassion. We concluded that it does not matter if the donor remains anonymous or wants to attach his or her name to the donation. The important thing is to share our blessings with others. So dana, as Krishna says, is a duty that we have to others we must never abandon. So it is not something that you vote in during a certain time of the year and you tune out during the rest of the year. It should be part of our natural life. Agree to share with whatever we have with others in need. Paropakara punyaya. Paropakara punyaya. Para upakara punyaya. An act that benefits another is virtue. It's called punya. Papaya parapidanam. Papaya parapidanam. An act which injures another, which is injurious to another, is called sin or papa. So we have papa and punya. These are what we accrue due to our karma, our actions. We'll always treat as papa or punya. And elders say that better to have a lot of punya in our bank karma account to counteract much of the papa that we have. So at the end, it will be better to have a positive punya flow than a negative punya flow. And dana is the easiest way to finance your punya account, whatever little that you can give. So please remember that dana is the duty that we have to others. And then I started a story to show the effect of dana. Yudhishthira, this occurs in Mahabharata, Vanaparva, and chapters 260 and 261. Yudhishthira asked Vyasa, tell me the detailed story of Mudgala. Why did Mudgala give away the food grains that he had collected with such great effort? To whom did he give it? Tell me all the details. Then Vyasa tells Yudhishthira, There lived in Kurukshetra a great sage by name of Mudgala. He was a righteous person, harboring no envy to others. Adveshta Sarvabhutana. He had complete mastery over his senses, Shama and Dama. After the farmers gathered the grains, several would still be on the ground. Mudgala would spend a great deal of effort to pick those grains and collect them in a bag. He would then use this to feed his family. And while he was collecting the food grains from the farmers' fields, a lot of birds would be there too, picking away the little grains. Mudgala did not bother them, and the birds did not bother them. They appeared to be completely happy with each other's company. Though Mudgala had very little by way of food, he would never turn away a guest, never. Annadana was his primary concern. Twice a month, he would invite guests and share the food with them. He was God-centered in his life. Yudhishthira, I should tell you a strange thing about him. If a guest came to his house and there was only one grain in the cooking pot, it would multiply to fill the pot and feed the guest, Akshaya Patra. This enabled him to feed hundreds of Brahmins. His fame grew far and near. And Maharshi Durvasa is the son of Atri and Anasuya, he heard about it. And Durvasa, of course, is a great Muni, but given to short temper. Very easy to make him angry, and then he would curse you. Durvasa donned tattered clothes, disheveled his hair, and came to Mudgala's hermitage, and he said, Annarthinam anupraptam vidyamam vijasattama. I have come here to eat, O best among Brahmins. Mudgala greeted Durvasa, offered him water and a seat. He prepared meals for him. Durvasa gobbled up the food very fast. Thinking that Durvasa was still hungry, Mudgala served him more food. Durvasa cleaned his plate, the cooking vessel, and licking his fingers, left the dining room. Since not a morsel of food was remaining in the cooking vessel, there was no opportunity for it to multiply. After Durvasa departed, Mudgala had nothing left to eat. Mudgala would continue to collect leftover grains from the field. Every time he had collected enough, Durvasa would come and eat everything that Mudgala had. Mudgala did not have any grains left to feed his family or himself. Yet Mudgala kept his cool. He was not angry. He was not envious. Even his wife and children remained calm. It was Durvasa's intent all the while to make Mudgala angry. He wanted to make Mudgala mad. He came to his house 6 times and ate everything that Mudgala had cooked. Yet he could not make Mudgala angry. He did not even see any sign of unhappiness on Mudgala's face. It was as calm and brilliant as ever. He decided to stop testing Mudgala and said, Tatsamo nasti lokesmin data matsarya varjitaha. You are free of jealousy and you give generously. There's nobody in this world who is as generous as you, and you have absolutely no animosity towards anybody, and there's nobody can match you. He continued, O Maharshi Mudgala, hunger is very cruel indeed. Hunger can make a person transgress dharma. A hungry one has no capacity to distinguish between right and wrong. His tongue is always seeking to taste food. Such a tongue can lead a man to commit great sins. All living creatures are foraging for food. Man is a slave to food. Mind is fickle and cannot be restrained easily. Restraining the mind and practice of meditation are essential to spiritual progress. It is exceedingly painful to donate what has taken so much effort to win. You have accomplished all these. Though you were hungry, you gladly shared the food with your guests. You never became depressed or angry. Hunger has absolutely no hold on you. Your tongue obeys you and has lost its independence. You have collected the grains with considerable effort, yet you have donated it to others. I am very pleased by your noble hospitality. As I mentioned, there's a story in Mahabharata where once there was a great famine. For several months, there was no rain, and people were very hungry, and all the silos were empty of grain. And Vishwamitra was also extremely hungry, and he goes looking for food. And then he sees a Chandala's house, a butcher, and he sees dog meat hanging on the wire fence. So Vishwamitra wanted to steal that piece of meat and eat. That's why Chandala comes and says, Vishwamitra, you cannot do that. It is adharma. It is abhaksha. Abhaksha means inedible. Bhaksha means edible. Abhaksha means something that is inedible for you. You are a great Brahmin. You should not eat dog meat. Then Vishwamitra talks about hunger and what hunger does to a man. One can live without food for maybe a few weeks. Without water, you cannot live for more than 3 or 4 days. So I am desperately in need of food. I don't care if it's a dog's meat. I first have to survive. If I survive, then I can atone for my adharma by performing yajnas, and therefore I can always do prayaschitta, but I cannot live without food. So give me food. So there is a very nice discussion on the effect of hunger on a man's mind and what it can do. And the Chandala's response to Vishwamitra, not to be a slave of your tongue, but be a master of your tongue. So here, Mudgala was completely master of his tongue. You possess the following qualities, Mudgala. You have sense control, you're brave, you're compassionate, you have a calm mind, you're very peaceful, you're very kind, you're very truthful, and you adhere to dharma. You have conquered several worlds by your dharma. Even the heavenly bound celestials have extolling your virtue. You are qualified to go to heaven with your body, a feat that is reserved for only a very select few. Even as Durvasa was completing his words, a celestial plane descended from heaven. The celestial pilot bowed down to Mudgala and said, Maharshi, please climb aboard the plane. This has been sent because of your good actions. You can go to higher worlds in this plane. Mudgala asked, tell me about the life of those residing in the heaven. What are their characteristics? What kinds of austerities do they perform? What do they hope to gain by the austerities? What kind of happiness exists in heaven? Are there any defects in heaven? If there are, tell me about them. The Devaduta is the charioteer. He said, oh, best among Brahmins, you're very perceptive. Most people are of the opinion that life in heaven is great. They strive hard to attain that place. Yet you ask about heaven as if you know nothing. Let me tell you about heaven. Heaven is indeed a very hard place to it. Heaven is Swarga. Those who lie, who do not perform yajnas, who do not lead an austere life, can never reach heaven. The ones who are qualified to go to heaven are the dharmiks, the peaceful, the masters of their senses, the generous or the donors or danis, the brave, those who die in war facing enemy. These are the ones who can go to heaven. Those who practice Ashtanga Yoga can also go to heaven. Only good deeds make one eligible to go there, and heaven is full of good people. One should have a lot of punya to go to heaven, not papa. All amenities are found there. There is no dearth for anything. There are beautiful mountains, lakes, and forests in heaven. People there do not get hungry, they do not get thirsty, they do not encounter hot and cold weather. There are no inauspicious winds in heaven. The sounds you hear are very pleasing to the ear. There is no sorrow in heaven. Only by the accumulation of punya one can go to heaven. The bodies are born out of one's good karma and not by any parent. People don't perspire in heaven. The bodies do not have any odor. One need not worry about excreting. The clothes they wear are ever fresh. As a matter of fact, there is no dust in heaven. The flowers stay fresh, emanating wonderful aroma. They travel in pushpaka vimanas. They do not have any desire, anger, greed, arrogance, and envy. I have told you briefly what is in store in the heavens. They are not under the influence of likes and dislikes. They overcome dvandvas. O Brahmin, so many sages strive hard to enter the heavens, but it is extremely difficult to do so. Mudgala, you have achieved the almost impossible. You are most welcome in the heaven. There are other higher heavens above the heaven that I am taking you to, and I have described only one. You ask for any defects that might exist in the heaven, and I will tell you, answer that question. One can stay there only as long as one exhausts the fruits of merits accumulated on earth. Once you have exhausted your punya account, you're no longer welcome. Once he completes all the fruits of his karmas, he will be sent back to earth. This is the main defect. Just as people on earth do not think of the heaven, people in heaven do not think of rebirth on earth. After enjoying such a wonderful life in heaven, it is very difficult to return to earth. After spending a week in wonderful, warm Arizona climate, difficult to get back to Minnesota. As they leave the heaven to the earth, they will be unconscious. The garlands they're wearing will begin to fade. Dust covers their bodies. Their hearts pound in fear. This too is a defect of heaven. Whatever merits and demerits one accumulates on earth will make him go to other worlds for fructification. That's why earth is called karma bhumi and the higher worlds are called phala bhumi. Mudgala wanted to know about the defectless planes of existence. The celestial said that loka is called Brahma loka, Vishnu loka, Kailasa. People with the least bit sense of attachment can never go there. Nor can one who has karma, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya can go to higher planes, Brahmaloka. One must not have even a trace of desire to go there. Only the noblest of the noble can reach the feet of Brahmaloka. Now I have answered your questions. Without further ado, may we now board the plane, please, and go to heaven? Mudgala thought for a while. He reached a conclusion and said, Devaduta, salutations to you. You please have a safe journey back. I do not want heaven. I am not interested in the pleasures of heaven. What will I do, knowing the defects that you just pointed out? You have said the residence in heaven is only temporary. I want to wait so that I can go to a stable and permanent place of happiness. This is what Mudgala says to Devaduta. After the Devaduta left, Mudgala began the austere life to prepare himself to Vishnu Loka or Brahma Loka. He found great pleasure and peace of joy in leading an austere life befitting a true yogi. All the negativities fled from him. He stopped seeing differences in people, Samadharshi. He had conquered all dualities, overcome all the dvandvas. He saw with an equal eye all the creation. We have seen that already. This person, Pandita, sees with an equal eye a cow, a chandala, a dog, etc. He had conquered all dualities. He understood the meaning of Brahman and obtained self-realization. He was in deep meditation on Brahman. In course of time, Mudgala achieved the highest loka. So he realized Brahman when he was still alive, which is what is called Jivan Mukti, and he would never would be born again. Therefore, Vyasa tells Yudhishthira, do not despair at your current situation. Engage yourself in meditation. You will regain your kingdom. After spending 13 years in the forest, you will regain your kingdom. Distance yourself from unnecessary sorrow. Do not despair. So Vyasa spoke to Yudhishthira. That's the story of Mudgala, who exemplifies the merits one gains by performing dana. So to emphasize again, let us not forget that dana is part of our obligation, our duty to others. And so if you remember that, then I think our life will be much better. So that concludes the discussion on dana before I tell you something else from Mahabharata. So what I want to do is to address the following question. Every action has a reaction. In the moral plane, that's called karma. Whatever you do, whatever karma you do will befit an appropriate result, which is called punya or papa. And that result may manifest immediately or may manifest later or may manifest in a later life. So we don't know. It is called adrushta. We cannot see it, but it is there. That's the moral law of action and reaction. That's the foundation in our Hindu philosophy. So we are responsible for our own actions. Then the question arises, are the children responsible for their own actions? Do children accumulate papa? Do children accumulate punya? Do children accumulate sin? Or children innocent of what they do? That's a very interesting question to ask. It's called juvenile justice. Here we talk about juvenile justice, what it is that attaches to children and what are those things that children are exempt from. A very nice story appears in Mahabharata addressing this very same question. This is the story of Animandavya. It occurs in Adi Parva, the very first Parva of Mahabharata, Animandavya Upakhyana, in chapters 107 and 108. Janamejaya asked Vaishampayana, "Oh, best of Brahmins, you told us Yamadharma was born of a Shudra woman due to a curse of Mandava Maharshi. What did Yama, the embodiment of Dharma, do to be born as a human? Who is Mandavya that cursed Yama? I'm eager to learn all of these through your discourse." This is the very beginning of Mahabharata. To which Vaishampayana says, there once lived a great Brahmin by name Mandavya. He was very truthful, he was religious, he was righteous, and he meditated regularly. He would go into silent meditation for days together, Mauna Vrata, as they call it. When he was meditating thus, a group of bandits came to his hermitage. The royal guards were chasing the thieves. The thieves had stolen jewels from the royal treasury and were running away from the pursuing guards. The thieves hid the stolen goods in Mandavya's hut and hid behind the bushes. The royal guards came and saw the rishi under the tree. They asked him, "Oh, meditating Muni, oh, Brahmin, where did the thieves go? Please tell us. we have pursued them and we want to arrest them. We want to bring justice to them. The rishi did not answer. The gods repeated the question several times, but the meditating rishi did not respond. They then entered the hut and discovered the stolen goods. The gods suspected that the rishi himself was behind the theft, and perhaps he was the leader of the thieves. They then dragged the rishi to the king. Even the king could not get any words out of Mandaviya's mouth. The king determined that Mandaviya must be the leader of the gang, and therefore wanted to punish him and set a lesson for others. And so he ordered that Mandaviya be mounted on top of a sharp and long spear. So a spear was put into his stomach, and then that spear was vertical, his body was horizontal. It was stuck in the middle of the town. He was mounted on a spear, and the guards left him on the street corner. To the amazement of all, the rishi remained alive for several days, though he was not fed any food. Several other rishis came to see this amazing sight. They came as birds and saw the sight and were very sorrowful. Then the rishis in the form of the birds asked Mandaviya, "O the best of Brahmins, what is the reason for this misfortune? What great sins had you committed in order that you are suffering this great distress?" Mandaviya said, "O rishis, who can blame for this? I myself am responsible for my current situation. No one has to take the blame for this because I must have done something and I am paying for what I did. Karma is following me." Every day, the royal guards would come and see Mandaviya dangling on the spear. They were amazed that he was still alive and was deep in yoga. They would go and report to the king daily about what Mandaviya's condition was. The king became very afraid. Something must have gone, I must have done something very wrong. This person does not look like the leader of a gang. I'm terribly afraid. And so he called his ministers and priests for advice. The king then went to Mandaviya and begged forgiveness. And Mandaviya, at that time, opened his mouth and forgave the king. The king then ordered Mandaviya be removed from the spear with great care. No matter how much the gods tried, they could not separate Mandaviya from the spear. They decided to cut the spear. They removed that part of the spear that was sticking out from Mandaviya's body. Though a piece of the spear was embedded in his body, Mandaviya was walking around with a cheerful disposition. He even went into great tapas and earned the highest merits. Since the piece of spear was embedded in his body, he came to be known as Ani Mandaviya. Anihi means a piece of spear. A piece of spear was still in his body, so he was known as Ani Mandaviya. Ani Mandaviya was sure that he must have done something in the past for the impaling. He could not remember any such incident. The only one who keeps a record of past deeds is Yama Dharma, or Lord of Death. So using his yogic powers, Ani Mandaviya went to see Yama. He tells Yama, "Dharmaraja, tell me the reason why I was speared. Tell me now. I will demonstrate to you my yogic strength right here." Yama said, "O great one, when you were young, you used to stick sharp grass into insects. This is the reason why you're undergoing pain now. Something that you did when you were very young, when you were a child, you would pick up dried grass and stick it to the eyes of the insects. Dharma is subtle in the sense that the effect of even a small cause can be very large, and even if the sin is small, the effect can be many times that causes immense grief. Any Mandavya could not remember hurting the insects in his youth. He was not satisfied with Yama's explanation. With a gruff voice, he said, "Tell me exactly when did I do these acts of papa?" Yama said, "When you were a very small child." Animandavya said, "Yamaraja, it seems to me that wrong actions done by anyone who is less than 12 years old should not bring upon any karma. Such young people know not the difference between dharma and adharma. Moreover, the punishment that has been meted out to me is grossly unfair compared to the cause. Sticking grass needle in the insects is me the cause. The effect is the spear in my body. For doing something when I was a little child, do I have to suffer such great pain? Don't you know that killing a Brahmin is the greatest sin? For what you have done to me without proper thinking, I curse you to be born as a human being. A Shudra woman will be your mother. Let me also proclaim a new law. You must obey it. From now on, any wrong committed by a youngster less than 14 years of age should not be considered as adharma. The youngster must not incur any sin. Only wrongs committed after the age of 14 should be held accountable. He then left Yama's about. That's how this juvenile justice came about in Mahabharata. So until you're 40 years old, you're not held accountable for your actions. He then left Yama's about. One cannot escape from the curse of a great Brahmin. Yama was born on the earth, as you know, as Vidura. Because Vidura was an incarnate of Yama, he possessed great knowledge. He had conquered Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. Also, he had mastered all the scriptures. He was very peaceful and was always engaged in the service of the Kurus. So that is Animandaviya's story. This is the one that tells you the wrongs that one does when one is a very child is not taken into account. You are kind of excused. Here, I think they call it you will be tested as a minor, not as an adult when you commit certain crimes when you are young. So that's the take by Mahabharata on the wrong things done by youngsters. So that's another story from Mahabharata. And I kind of get attached to these stories because the more you read, the stories are important. Yudhishthira always asks the question. He knows the answer. Yudhishthira knows the answers to his questions, but he still asks questions. And that's because Vyasa wants the rest of us to know what the real reason for the question and what the answers are. So that's the reason why reading Mahabharata has been a great pleasure. Any questions or comments so far?
Dr. Kumar, this is Geeta. My camera is not working, but I want to go back on generosity, giving that we talked about. Like we grew up, right, saying that if somebody does something for you, we should do something back in return to that person. So basically we are doing like from A to B, right? A form of generous giving back. But what you are talking about is a little bit more, right? It's more like paying forward. It's not from A to B, but it's from A to B, and B now gives it to C, which is totally somebody different.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if you wait for, let's take the following. Somebody does something good for you, and you're grateful for what they did, and you want to pay them back appropriately, right? So that's a good pro. That's pretty good. But dana goes beyond that. Right. Dana should be inherent inherent urge within you to be part of society. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, if you take from society and do not give back to society, you're called a thief. He calls a thief. So it should be a part of you that says, I belong to this community and my success is definitely due to my own effort. But also many other people have contributed to my success, and it is only appropriate that I share the blessings of God with others. That sort of inner urge for you to help others, that's the real motivation for dana. And it's perfectly okay to wait. If somebody does something good for you, and then you remember that and you want to repay that in kindness, that's fine. But dana goes slightly beyond that. It is your inner urge to do that. That's what Krishna says. Krishna said that should be part of your duty. Duty means to do. It should be part of your duty. Don't expect until somebody asks you. Let it be part of your duty. So dana is important. Again, what is important in dana is the sankalpa. Sankalpa is the attitude that you have with which you give. So that is important. Amount is not so important. Dr. Sashi Sane last week told us that dana becomes much more meaningful to an individual if he or she gives until it begins to hurt. And that's when the real meaning of dana applies to you. But dana also, the scriptures say that you should not give to the extent that you are jeopardizing your own family's well-being and security. So it's the balancing act. But the important thing is give.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Naina. What I wanted to know, these are beautiful stories, moral lessons from the Mahabharat or other scriptures. These are extreme examples, in a sense, because we don't actually do until it hurts to the extent that it will kill us or whatever. I mean, we can go beyond our budget and etc. So yes, as you mentioned, it's a balancing act, but Mudgala, how can we ever reach those heights of giving or those heights of, Mudgala and the other sage? They've done so much that it's almost a little discouraging that even though we try to live a good life and with giving and dana and etc., we just always will fall short of perhaps, the bar. The bar is set very high. That's what I wanted to say.
Which is okay. That does not preclude you from trying.
Mhm.
It will be wonderful if you reach the bar. It will be even great if you exceed the bar, but we should at least try. Not trying to reach the bar at all is what is discouraged. And so, Mutkala, I think you should take these stories with in the proper spirit. Mutkala's story emphasizes the following. No matter how poor you are, you still feel for the agony and the distress of another person. Even if you're very poor, you share whatever you have, whatever little you have with another person. And it's already said that the benefit of dana is trupti. Trupti is contentment. The contentment that you get, or the sukha, or the happiness that you get, is incomparable. It cannot be described. It cannot be. It's like a mute man eating a piece of candy. And if you ask that person, how was the candy? He cannot describe it. And it's indescribable internal joy, the contentment that you get. That's the benefit of dana. And Mudgala understood that. So Mudgala was happy, and he was not easily perturbed because he understood completely the meaning of dana.
Oh, thank you.
It's hard, but we should try. Okay.
Dr.
Prasanna?
Kumar,
Yeah. Go ahead, Geeta.
Just real quick comment on that was, now there is in this country, right, paying forward. You go, they talk about somebody paying for coffee for the person behind you and things like that. And that's something we can all do, right? If each one does 2 or 3 acts of those kindness, you're anonymous, you are just doing small acts. If we all did, I think all of us, the giver feels good, as well as the receiver, they also feel good.
Yeah. The best kind of dana, Dr. Shishisane once mentioned, I'm not quite sure if he was referring to it. Correct me if I am wrong. I think his father would leave certain amount of money at certain people's houses because he recognized their need and he did not want them to know who the donor was, because sometimes you do not want to shame the receiver by exhibiting your generosity. So anonymous donations are perfectly okay. Perfectly okay, but give. It doesn't matter.
Prasanna, this is Anand. Just 2 points to, not to change anything you've said, but just to amplify the important discussion. I think one, first, I think of the important verse in Bhagavad Gita towards the end of 9th chapter. Yat karoshi, yadashnasi, yat juhosi, dadasi, yat, and so on. Yat tapasyasi kaunteya, tat kurushva madarpanam.
Yeah.
So that the motivation for dhanam as bhakti, the offering, doing it for the sake of the love of God. Once there was a discussion between Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples, and Vivekananda was a young monk at that time, and he heard his teacher make an important statement, Shiva Jnane Jiva Seva, that everything that you do, all that you give, must be done with the consciousness of doing it for God's sake, Ishvara Arpitam.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our puja, we do puja, and in the sankalpa of the puja that you mentioned, we always say Ishvara Prityartham. I'm doing this to please God, to serve God. And so I think, because in the earlier discussions, we had, you were discussing also, and there were some questions about how do we control ego in acts of dhanam. And I think one of the important ways is by developing the motivation of doing all of these acts as acts of bhakti, acts of worshiping God, so that itself becomes the end.
Mm-hmm.
The satisfaction, the joy of it is the joy of an act of worship, or an act of pleasure, pleasing God. So the relationship between dhanam and bhakti, I think, is an important one. And secondly, Prasanna, I think that, let me tell you, make my point with a small story. There was a priest who had his own place of worship, his own temple. He was a priest there. And the temple was also a place of dhanam, giving a lot of gifts, feeding the hungry, giving clothing to those who didn't have clothing, and so on. And he one day said that when I feed the hungry and I have meals for those who come to my temple, or I give out clothing to those who are naked and can't keep themselves warm, everybody praises me as a great saint. But when I ask, why are there so many people in my community who continue to be hungry year after year, who can't feed their families, who can't clothe their children, they condemn me as a revolutionary. And I think that in thinking about Dhanam today, we do have certainly to commend individual giving, in other words, Dhanam as charity, but those individual acts should not all prevent us from asking the larger questions. How does Dhanam relate to good public policy? How do we, in other words, we don't solve the problem of poverty by individual giving. We solve, which we should do, and I'm not at all saying that that is not important. But maybe in those times, when these texts were written, Mahabharata, with all these beautiful stories, we didn't have some of the social problems. We didn't have the problems of, structural problems of poverty and economic deprivation that we have today. So that so Dhanam was spoken of much more at the level of individual personal interactions, but not at the level of social realities. And how do we bring people out of poverty? How do we make sure that everyone has all that he or she needs for dignified and decent living? Because I think, you could have individual gift giving, but in a context where the larger structures of the society does not allow human beings to flourish. I'm just saying that, in our context today, we need to commend individual giving. But I think also the whole idea of Dhanam, the rich idea of Dhanam, necessitates that we also look at larger kinds of solutions to
Yes.
problems. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is where I think, Anant, very, very good point. You do have many philanthropic organizations that take individual contributions, collecting individual contributions to stave off hunger among children. So there are certain organizations that have dedicated themselves to uplifting the poor, helping them educate, helping them housing, etc., etc. And those philanthropic organizations also need our support. My only comment is that if before you give to a philanthropic organization, please make sure that it's all legitimate. Because I have read some horror stories where people meaning to be good have collected money. For every dollar that you have donated, only about a dime has actually gone into their particular mission. 90 cents out of a dollar is used for advertising and obscene salaries for senior executives. So if you're donating to any charitable organization, which is the collection of individual donations, please Google and make sure that it is a legitimate organization. So we don't want to be. Right now, there are many organizations that are collecting money for COVID relief. You have to be very wary of them because when the opportunity is there, people swoop in. But I do agree with Anant that we as individuals have a responsibility, but the larger question is how do we uplift the downtrodden in the society? What is it that we can do? As an individual, I don't know what to do except to support an organization that I think is doing a good job of uplifting the people who are unfortunate. That's about all I can say.
I have a comment on that. I think supporting organizations which get all of their money from individual people donating, generous people donating is very, very good. And you have to be, some of them are suspect and whatnot. But I think the greater issue is if you want to really leave poverty behind, only something like a government and what we say policy makers can make that happen. I don't really think the organizations can fill in the gaps. The churches and the temples and the mosques, nobody can fill the gap. They can only touch on certain parts of the population. It's only things like child tax credit to keep children out of poverty, or the SNAP program, feeding children, or WIC, women with infants and children program, and foods, like food stamps, etc. Only those things can actually get into changing the poverty levels in this country and anywhere else. I can only talk about the US. But so I'm saying only our taxes going towards these things can bring, the poverty issue where it should be. Anyway, that's my comment.
To become politically active is what you're saying.
Yes.
Don't sit on the sidelines and complain. If you want to change, you should be the agent of change. Mahatma Gandhi said, if you want to see something change, you be the agent of change.
Hi,
Yeah.
this is Anand.
Yeah.
To me, it seems that much of what we have personally is a matter of pure luck. And if a few things had gone the wrong way, the results would have been totally different. So therefore, it behooves us to help others to the extent that we can. So I think it's a fairly straightforward thing. If once we are willing to recognize that we ourselves are not responsible for everything that we have.
Absolutely. For success in life, you need three things: sadhana krupa, guru krupa, and daiva krupa. Sadhana krupa is your own personal effort. Guru krupa, without teachers. Teachers, not classroom teacher. Your brother is a teacher, your neighbor is a teacher, your friend is a teacher. There are lots of them whose grace blesses us. And finally, of course, with daiva krupa, nothing can happen. So daiva is important. So what Anand says is correct, that we have to recognize that our success has depended upon so many things. Yes. All I want people to remember is, let us not get bogged down by what can go wrong in our great inner desire, inner urge to help others. But let us at least resolve. Let us at least take Krishna's advice as a must. It is our duty to help others. Once we completely understand that, then giving becomes easy. It is not as difficult as it appears to be. It is my duty to help others.